boy.
Thank you. So, when I was in the 5th grade,
I don't want to hear this story again.
at the Isidore Newman School, Walter Isaacson was the president of the student body. Mm-hmm. And if you'd shown any of the teachers or administrators then the picture of us on stage now, they had looked at Walter and said, yeah, that's about right. And they looked at me and said, there's no chance he's up there.
Yeah, right.
That's exactly what they would have said.
And they were wrong.
They were wrong. Cool. And the Isidore Newman School, which started out in 1903 as a manual training center for Jewish orphans, mm-hmm. And it has gone on to be a factory for all-pro quarterbacks in the NFL. But in between has generated a couple of writers.
Well, it was good that Eli and Peyton went there because Michael and I didn't have to worry about who were the famous Newman grads. We were like agate type also from Newman.
But there'll be a New Orleans theme a bit to this, I think, this conversation. And very, oddly and coincidentally, you're publishing this book about Elon Musk 3 weeks before I publish a book with Sam Bankman-Fried in the
We both had wild rides with the road character.
We both have a lot of explaining to do.
Yeah, exactly.
And
when did you figure out your character was going rogue?
Let's talk about that. But so this is your debutante party, not mine, and I wanted to. So the book, this thing landed on my doorstep 3.5 days ago, and I read it, but I had to read it fast. I hadn't thought very much about how to frame a conversation. I finished it this morning. I was blown away.
Thank you.
I was blown away, and let me see if I can articulate why I was blown away. It is, I think, my favorite of your books. I think one way I judge my writing is like Olympic dives. It's like not just quality of the execution, but degree of difficulty.
Yeah.
If it's a triple flip with a splash, it's better than if it's just jumping in and it doesn't splash. And the degree of difficulty was extremely high. And it was obvious to me over the last few years when we've spoken that the degree of difficulty for you was high. And, and I thought, it's fine. When I got to a page when I thought, yeah, that's why the degree of difficulty is high. But there's a page in here. Here it is. Right here. Mm-hmm. There's pictures. And in this picture of Elon Musk going into Twitter is Walter Isaacson. You're there. You're
the back of my head.
You're a fly on the wall. You're a fly on the wall. And you've had living subjects before. Mm-hmm. People have been saying, "Oh, this is hard for you because you don't." Your first biography was about Kissinger. Right?
Yeah, I know. Tell me about it.
Yeah, but your participation really in his life for the last few years changed the tenor of the book. And I'm gonna let you speak eventually. Okay, just give me just a sec, though.
I'm perfectly happy.
Okay, but I'm giving you a little break here, and then it's going to be your show. But the thing that was so interesting to me, because it's a problem that I've had to grapple with, is that we live right now in a world of instant judgment.
Yeah.
We live in a world where people celebrate their own quick judgments. Snap judgments, mob sentiment forms very quickly. It's very hard to preserve an absence of judgment, a feeling of an absence of judgment. And you have a character about whom the world is judgmental. There isn't anybody in this room on the planet who doesn't have an opinion about Elon Musk. And you, who may know him better than anybody in the world now, managed to write 600 pages, and I actually don't know exactly what you think of him. I learned all kinds of things about him, but you've written a Rorschach test that people are going to come to it, and your readers are going to have such a range of response to it because you've just laid him out beautifully.
Well, it was that way with Steve Jobs, too. I mean, some people, they'd finish the book. I remember being here, and they'd come up afterwards, and they'd say, I finished your book, and I could look at them, and they could say, I hate Steve Jobs, or I love Steve Jobs. And what you do, and what some of us do from Louisiana, is say, just let me tell you a story. And you make it a narrative story, and you make it really colorful, and people can form their own judgments from it. Now, in the end, I think anybody will have pretty strong reactions and a lot of judgments, but I do try to get out of the way of what is an amazing story. There's a wonderful T. Harry Williams, you and I grew up with, the first great biography either of us read of Huey Long. It just begins with a paragraph of Huey Long going down to South Louisiana, where he's Catholic, and saying on the stump, because he's from North Louisiana, oh, and then I had to hook up our horse and take my Catholic grandmother to church. And one of his campaign managers afterwards says, Huey, you never told us you had a Catholic grandmother. He said, hell, we didn't even have a horse. And you just get that anecdote and you laugh, but T. Harry Williams lets you build your own. Is this a rogue? Is this a liar? Is this? And I really tried to do that with Musk.
Yeah, and you did do it with him. Anyway, I want to follow the Louisiana thread, but I want to come back to it later.
Okay.
I want to know the story sort of behind the book, like how this happens and how your relationship with him develops. So just tell us a little bit how you come to Elon Musk as a subject.
Yeah, I was kicking around for some ideas, and a mutual friend of Musk and mine said, you really got to do it.
Who is that?
Antonio Gracias. He's on the board of Tesla, and he was on the board of the Aspen Institute. Mm-hmm. So, nice guy. And he said, you got to do Musk. I said, well, I'll talk to him. And one day, one afternoon, we were actually out in Sag Harbor, and I had a 90-minute conversation with him. We got on the phone, and I said, if I do this book, I don't want to do it based on 5 or 10 interviews or 20 interviews. I just want to be by your side, as you saw in that picture, just watching you day and night. At breakfast, well, he doesn't eat breakfast, but lunch, dinner, late night, walking the factory lines. And the other criteria is you have no control over the book. Nothing's off limits. You have no control. You don't get to read it.
And he probably still, has he read it yet?
I don't know. He says jokingly, Walter told me I couldn't read it. So, not that I trust everything, but at least he pretends he hasn't read it.
So when the subject is first suggested to you, Elon Musk, what is your instant reaction?
So I'm thinking, man, that's a great idea. Here's a person, because I love technology, creativity, people who break rules and innovate, you know, the think different type thing. And here's a guy who brought us into the era of electric vehicles, had just had Tesla go almost bankrupt at the beginning of 2019, but then become more valuable than all the other car companies in the world combined. 1 million cars, brings us into the era of solar roofs with batteries. The only person who can shoot off rockets and get things to orbit and have the boosters land.
Is that true? He's the only one who's done that?
Nobody. China hasn't done it. The US hasn't done it. Boeing hasn't done it. He's the only person who's been able to do reusable rockets. He's put up 5,000 satellites, recreated the internet in low Earth orbit. And I said, man, this is everything. And then about a year into riding along with him, everything's going well. I say, man, you know, this has been a pretty good year. You're the richest person on earth. You're Times Person of the Year. You've done all these things. You're going to relax. And he said that he was secretly buying shares of Twitter. I went, oh, this is not going to end well, this movie. And so that's the pivot point.
Yeah, but I want you to back up because you don't know this person. You're introduced to him. You tell him your terms. He accepts the terms.
Yeah.
Where does the relationship go then? How do you start to enter into his life?
I don't fill his silences. I'm a quiet observer.
But physically, where are
Physically,
you? You're teaching a class at Tulane
no,
University.
but 1 week or two. I got a lot of my students here, so a round of applause for all my Tulane students.
Let's hear for Tulane.
And your son is going to go to Tulane, which we like too. So you probably haven't told Tabitha that, right? Did I just reveal something?
Well, we have a son who's a junior, and he hasn't decided.
What I do is I'm always by his side taking notes, and I try very carefully just to be the observer. I definitely don't fill his silences. He almost doesn't notice me by the end because he gets into demon mode sometimes where he is just a total jerk. Actually, there's a technical term that begins with A, but he is like reaming. And it's like, I'm sitting there, how can you? And I was worried about the Heisenberg principle, that my observation would change the subject. But, you know, people said, I wish that were the case, but he's just as brutal when you're watching as any other time. And so about a week or so per month, I would just go and I'd say,
Wherever-
where are you?
Wherever he
And
was.
he would say, I'm at Boca Chica in the tip of Texas at the Starship launch pad. I'd go there, I'd have a little overnight bag, because you never knew where you're going. And for about a week, he'd say, late at night, he'd say, okay, we got to get to Fremont in California. And he had a plane, obviously. And I would just tag along, and after about a week or 10 days, I'd straggle back to New Orleans, shower, change clothes, teach the classes, and then go back out again.
And what was his attitude towards you from in the beginning? Like, how did he handle you? He's not...
He is very, he talks about being on the autism disorder spectrum, Asperger's he calls it. And he is very unaware of other people around him and makes no emotional connection. So I could just be sitting there or walking the factory line with him, and he wouldn't do things like, oh, here, let me show you this, or whatever. He would just be doing his work, and I'd be standing there.
And so you could move into his life, and it didn't
Totally.
didn't bother him.
At the time, I knew more about him than he knew about him.
Yeah, no.
Including he was then having children with both Grimes and Siobhan.
Right.
And I was in the midst of that.
Well, let's pause it. This is it. I don't want to just skip over this because
I'm trying to rapidly get back to the factory.
No, we can get to the rockets and the cars and the Boring Company and all that. But his love life is spectacular. I mean, it's an amazing thing.
And
it's even more amazing to me that all of his past loves seem to be, or almost all of them, seem to be wide open in talking to you about him.
Oh, especially, yeah, his wives in particular. He's only
So did he say to everybody, just talk to this guy?
I guess, because nobody said no.
What there isn't that surprised me in the story, there's no sense of other people's fear of him in talking to you.
No, they say, including his mother, his brother, they all just...
His father,
yeah, we'll get
to
there at some point,
yeah.
yeah. But all of his relationships with women are drama-driven turmoil.
Right.
Because he, as Grimes says, as Claire Boucher, the artist known as Grimes says, he had such a traumatic childhood that he associates love with trauma and drama. And so he's always stirring up drama.
So the minute he's in love, he's in drama.
Amber Heard type thing.
Right.
I mean, Amber being one of them, and who I talked to. And, but the only one who I just really like, who was perfect for him, was Tallulah Riley.
Yeah, clearly.
Married her twice. And the problem is she just wasn't storm and drang.
Right. Is the pattern that he would fall dramatically in love and then after a couple of months get bored? That's what it kind of read like.
No, because he keeps recycling back to...
Well, he creates the first couple of months over and over.
Yeah, but there's always a turmoil, a tumultuous breakup,
Right.
Huge... Look,
Right.
I know he wasn't noticing me because I was there for huge, loud fights.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're moving in. You get to his life. You get to a point where you're in his life invisible.
Well, even when we're down in Boca Chica, which is the most interesting place, which is this tip of Texas place where they have the launch pad for stories. He has the only home he has because his daughter rejected him because he's a billionaire, and so he sold all of his houses. He has a 2-bedroom home there, and I had an Airstream trailer right there. Huh. And I don't know if you've stayed in an Airstream for 4 or 5 days, but it's kind of fun. And you just sort of watch.
Just at any point, did he ask you what you were doing or why you were doing it, or could you do it this way, or could you leave this out?
No, he never did, and I had to talk to Kathy and others, my wife, about some self things. Amongst them, children under the age of 17 without their permission if it was something bad.
Right.
Other than...
He was letting you had to be the filter because he wasn't.
In some ways, they were calling me sometimes, too.
Right.
The other one was I was careful and maybe went a little too far, but he doesn't seem to be mad about it, about insider information. In other words, I knew because I was in the meeting when he secretly decided that they're going to build a $25,000 cheap global car that's going to transform Tesla. And they're also going to do it on the same platform as a robo-taxi. I was worried, and likewise, about 4 months ago, he decided to use artificial intelligence to totally revise how they're doing self-driving. So it's done by imitating humans through video learning.
As opposed to just following the lines of
swapping the lines of code. Yeah, you're right. And I'm thinking, all right, that's maybe proprietary information. I did quietly check with a couple people at Tesla about how much trouble that could be. And they shrugged. They said, he let you in the meeting.
Was there stuff in the book that would move stock prices?
It did.
It did?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I mean, I won't go too deep in that, but Tesla went way up.
When the book came out.
Because of the global car, which they think is huge. It's like
there's so much news, it's fire hose of news in the book. That's the most amazing thing.
Did you see the New York Post today? I haven't finished it yet. They're like 2 pages. I said, I even didn't know I'd written all that.
All right, I'm not going to worry this to death about you and him, but it's an interesting subject to me. There's a little bit of an undercurrent of criticism of both you and me with our subjects this time around, that the price of having access, the price of being
correct, and it's a really interesting topic.
Is it? I mean, it's an interesting topic I find it a problematic topic, but I'm curious what you think of this kind of line of criticism.
Well,
it comes only from journalists, by the way,
who don't have access.
They don't have access, but that's right. Who actually journalists who no one would want to hang around with.
Which doesn't include you, man.
But
one of the things that I had to keep in mind is it isn't about him or what he thinks.
Right.
The reader is your only client.
That's right.
This paragraph goes in because it's going to help the reader, or you never say, how is this person going to react? But for me, it was kind of easy because this guy just didn't seem to care.
He wouldn't care.
He wouldn't care. I don't think he cares now.
Right.
And so I knew. Actually, I don't want to lie.
This isn't like Kissinger.
I don't want to say this. There was a part of me that said, okay, he may go ballistic.
Right.
What's it going to be like when he's like sicking his fanboys on Twitter on me? But I thought, okay, I don't need to be his friend or whatever. The rest of it. So I kept trying to say, it's only about the reader. It's only about the reader. And I never felt that he was going to kick me out because of what I was doing. So it was not like writing about even Steve Jobs, who really had emotional connections, he really cared, et cetera. This guy didn't seem to care. It's like, all right, now we're going to go, to whatever. Yeah.
You can't wound him.
I think that he actually he said, I love pain. I thought, well,
I can inflict some of that.
Yeah. He said, in my childhood, it was all psychological pain.
So talk about
my father.
Talk about this.
He was sent to wilderness camp, when he was a young kid in South Africa. And he gets beaten up because he's scrawny and socially awkward, to put it mildly. And but the second time he goes, a few years later, he's grown up a bit. He said, I just learned to punch people really hard in the nose, even if they were beating me up, and that helped, which is a metaphor for everything it does, including on X and things. But he gets beaten up once on the playground so badly at school, pushed down the concrete steps with his brother there, and they smash his face, and he says he was in the hospital for a week. I think it was probably 4 or 5 days. He gets home, and he has to stand in front of his father for 90 minutes, who is a Jekyll and Hyde character, who's gone into dark mode, and berates Elon for being stupid, for being a weakling, and takes the side of the person who beat him up. So the demons from that, and the feeling, and his parents were split, and he was, being raised by this father, the feelings of love and the person protecting me causes me pain is what every single one of his ex-wives and girlfriends says is the key to him.
And how does he respond to that analysis?
He starts to get very teary-eyed. The only times it's hard to get him to talk is when you say, let's talk about your father again. And boy, he goes really silent. And sometimes he tears up. The interesting thing that I learned, and I first learned it on the Times-Picayune when I was a journalist down in New Orleans, is if somebody goes silent, most of us want to fill the silences. We want to say something. It's like you wait 30 seconds, you got to say something. He would go silent, and I would outlast him for 4 minutes or so. That's a really long time. And then suddenly, in a monotone, as if I were not there, he would just drone on. And his, both Justine, his first wife, and Tallulah said, late at night, when he had so much pressure on him, everything was going bankrupt, the rocket's going, he's energized by the pain, but he's also vomiting in the bathroom. And Tallulah's holding his head and said when that happened, he would channel things his father said to him. So that's the key to the demons in his head.
I'm not saying anything. Just sit here silently until you stop talking. Well, how do you think of this? I mean, you open the book with his childhood, and it's shocking. The childhood is shocking. It's a slap in the face to the reader almost. You do this for a reason. Do you think you remove that childhood, or you make it a more like our childhoods, a happy childhood?
You know what's interesting about our childhoods? Because we grew up in a very magical place with parents that were really smart and nice and everything else, is I sometimes wonder whether having a lot of demons from childhood gives you a lot of drives. You and I, with all due respect to both of us, are basically observers in this world of people doing really weird and wild things.
We're not trying to fix anything.
We're not trying to blow things up.
Right.
I've never tried to get a rocket to Mars. And the question is, do you have to be demon-driven?
To want to
Steve
change.
Jobs.
To want to change.
I mean, I look at every one of my characters. Right. Einstein.
Yep.
Growing up Jewish in Germany.
Yep.
Not happy. Leonardo. He's growing up illegitimate. His father won't legitimate him. Gay, left-handed, distracted. And he goes from the village of Vinci to Florence.
Right.
And has, even to his deathbed, he's still doing the deluge drawings. He's still tormented. And I go down, Steve Jobs, adopted and actually rejected by, or not accepted by the first adopted family, feels abandoned but chosen. So as Obama says in his memoirs, I think every successful person is either trying to live up to the expectations of his father or live down the sins of his father. And in his case, he said it's both. Well, that's true of Elon.
But this is the ingredient, the necessary unhappiness.
Well, I don't know. You and I had these happy childhoods that we didn't amount to much.
Well, but it's true. But it's true that you and I don't have the impulse to change the world.
We are more comfortable,
watching.
like Hawthorne writes about, being the detached observer.
Right. That's right. That's completely true. So with this, talk about a little bit of how Elon Musk escapes this.
Well, he runs away at 17 like everybody. Ben Franklin runs away at 17. Einstein runs away at 17.
Right.
You and I went down to, some Mardi Gras party or something, and Einstein's running away. His palms are sweating. And he escapes by leaving South Africa, which has been very violent, and comes to Canada at first with about $4,000. And eventually goes to Silicon Valley after going to Penn, and starts a couple of companies. One is a Zip2, which is like Google Maps, but before that. And the other is a really interesting one, X.com. And it was a financial payments app that also had a social network attached. It becomes PayPal. They oust him. He wants to keep it called X.com, and he wants it to be an everything app.
Right.
This is what drives him 22 years later to buy Twitter, turn it into X.com, and make it a payments app.
At what point in his career or life do people start saying this is a really unusual person who's going to do really unusual things?
I think...
I couldn't figure that out from the story.
Yeah, I think his first two companies, which are Zip2 and then what we'll call PayPal, both are successful, and they both make them, you can probably remember the numbers, like $100 million or so, which is a lot of money.
Yeah.
And instead of buying an island or buying a yacht, he wants to keep putting his chips on the table.
Right.
So with all the PayPal mafia that he's having a fight with, he decides he wants to send a rocket to Mars. And they keep saying, what are you talking about? He says, well, if we don't become a spacefaring civilization, human consciousness may die out. And they say, hey, bro, you're going nuts.
This is where he becomes different from everybody
Correct.
else.
And
Yes.
this is where everybody, Peter Thiel, I talked
Right.
to him, and Reid Hoffman, that whole PayPal mafia, they say suddenly, once he had a couple $100 million, he decides to put it all into trying to get a rocket to Mars.
So this is a different risk profile than most people.
Peter Thiel said that most great entrepreneurs know how to calculate risk.
Yeah.
And he said, Musk is different.
Yeah.
He's addicted to risk.
Yeah, that's the difference. That he's willing, that the next thing is as valuable as what he is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he wants to always up the game.
Yeah.
And now he's still doing it. I mean, he didn't have to buy Twitter, and now after buying
So
Twitter.
let's talk about that a little bit, just since it's the shocking turn the life story takes, the business story takes.
Mm-hmm.
Up to then, everything he's doing is actually it's about moving people through space. It's Tesla, it's his rockets, it's his
it's
tunneling
these grand
machine.
epic missions.
Yes.
A guy who had read superhero comics too often and thinks I'm going to bring us into the era of sustainable energy and space travel.
Help me understand why anybody would want to buy Twitter.
Well,
Because I watched this from
this was
the
like
other side.
a
It's
long
like,
time.
yeah.
There are about 4 or 5 reasons that I think he wanted to buy Twitter, and I've talked to him about all of them, and he even discusses them in the book. One was an insight Kathy had, which is he was beaten up all the time in the playground, always being bullied.
Right.
And the world's great playground is Twitter, and he can own it.
And be the bully.
And be the bully.
Right.
And he is.
Yeah.
Secondly, he's driven by the unfulfilled vision of X.com.
Right.
And he says, I can use this as an accelerant to do it.
Right.
Thirdly, he had a lot of money burning a hole in his pocket because he was so resentful at Elizabeth Warren for saying he didn't pay enough taxes that he ends up exercising these options in $10 billion and paying more tax than anybody in history has ever paid to any country, but still has $10 billion left over. And he says, what do I use all the time? I'm addicted to Twitter. Right. Let me start buying it up. And then there's the very complex thing, which I have in the book, but it was difficult, which is his oldest surviving child was named Xavier, after his favorite in the X-Men comics. This X letter is from SpaceX to X is there. And at age 16, about 3 years ago, she transitions. Right. Now he gets his head around that, but she becomes an absolute Marxist, she calls herself, and hates billionaires. And this causes him to sell all 5 of his houses. But she still totally rejects him, changes her name, and refuses to speak to him. And he goes into a tailspin.
His relationship with his children are really important.
Really important, and
which is
fraught.
It's a little odd that it's important to him because he doesn't have that feeling about other
people.
Right,
and it wasn't, because his father didn't have it with him. So it's very fraught, and he becomes convinced, both from the attacks from Elizabeth Warren, but also the Crossroads School in LA, which you know pretty well, feeling that the progressive woke mind virus, as he calls it, and people say, what do you mean by that? I said, trust me, Elon knows what he means by this progressive woke mind virus infected my child, and now she won't speak to me. And he felt that Twitter had also become sort of progressive left and was...
Well, it had.
And it had closed the aperture to some extent on free speech. Now, that's a difficult balance. You don't want hate speech. You don't want disinformation. But they were saying you can't question whether it was a lab leak, COVID, and you can't question lockdowns or mask mandates. That, you were Jay Bhattacharya, the people who ran, the critics of the COVID policy all got kicked off of Twitter. So all these dark things are jangling in his head after he has $10 billion in his pocket and having the greatest year of his life, and he starts secretly buying Twitter stock. And in April of last year, He's gotten about 9.9%, and he has.
And you've been watching that.
And I've been sitting there on the mezzanine while his brother is trying to talk him out of it.
Is he asking your advice?
No, he never asked my advice.
Did he?
Every now and then I say a question
Right.
that then he vaguely thinks is advice, which is like, why are you buying Twitter? And he'll say, yeah, maybe I'm wrong to do it. I said, no, that was a real question. So in April, he's offered a board seat for a standstill agreement.
Right.
And he gets worked up because he thinks Parag Agrawal, who's running Twitter, and Jack Dorsey, they haven't done anything on it. They haven't put video on it. They haven't made it a payment system. And he flies off in a frenzy to Hawaii, to Larry Ellison's place on Lanai,
Right.
to secretly meet somebody he was dating, Natasha Bassett, an Australian actress. And he stays up 3 nights in a row drinking Red Bull and taking Ambien. And at about...
Why would you do both together?
I asked him once, I said, I couldn't figure out if he was trying to sleep while he was doing Red Bull and after doing Ambien. He said, well, it gives me wings. And I didn't quite know the follow-up question. Like, are wings a good thing to have at 3 in the morning when you're
What
tweeting?
color are the wings?
Yeah, exactly. So on the 3rd night, he's having this pissing match, really, by text messages, all of which are in the book, against Parag. Your friend, Sam Bankman-Fried, makes a small cameo because he wants to invest or roll over his stock,
Right.
and they both think each other is nuts. So it's in my book. I'm sure it's in yours.
No, one of the most amazing sentences Sam Bankman-Fried ever uttered to me was when he came off a call with Elon's people. He said, Elon's a weird dude.
No, it was with Elon personally.
Sam Bankman-Fried calling someone weird.
He was right, though.
You're in rare air.
So on the 3rd night, he decides he's not going to take the board seat and that he's going to go hostile.
Right.
And Parag's going, wait, we got to talk. And Musk shuts him off and then flies to Vancouver because he's having a very complicated relationships because Grimes is in Vancouver and wants to introduce little X, their son, to her parents. She's from
It's a
Vancouver.
sentence no one has ever spoken before.
In fact, I think Chris Anderson's here, had him at the TED conference there. And so he wants to go to the TED conference. But after the dinner with the TED conference people, he plays Elden Ring till 5:30 in the morning with Grimes. This is a new game.
Right.
And at 5:30, when he finishes going through the last layer of hell in that game, he just sends out a message, I made an offer. And that's when he bought Twitter. That's when he offered to.
Is he well suited to owning Twitter?
No. He is well suited to being an engineer to understand material science. He's amazing at looking at an assembly lines and how it works. But I said, how does that translate to Twitter? Because he has no emotional feel for human interactions, or not a great emotional feel. And he said, well, Twitter's a technology company. We just have to fix the technology. I don't think I said it to him because I'm just an observer, but I say it in the book. Twitter's not a technology company. It's an advertising medium trying to gather eyeballs in a sweet little environment so people can put their brands and advertise. And he doesn't have that feel.
Does he know he doesn't have that feel?
Now he does because he's lost 60% of his advertisers.
Yeah. Let's go into the cheery part of the story, like what he's.
I thought that was
what he's good at. It's funny. You read the Jobs book, and you get a very clear sense of what Steve Jobs is good at.
Steve would walk around Johnny Ive's or their design studio, and he would feel what he called the chamfer of the phone. Right. How is this covered? And then he would compare it to what your fingers would feel if it went under it.
Right.
Jobs didn't care that much about design, but he would do something similar. He would walk the assembly line, sometimes till 2 or 3 in the morning.
You're talking about Musk.
Musk would walk the factory lines in Boca Chica, in Austin, in Fremont, in LA, and he would watch each step of the assembly line. And he made his designers, his Johnny Ive people, Franz van Holtzhausen, the other designers, have their desks right on the assembly line. So if they designed some beautiful chamfer or some way of doing the windshield wiper fluid or something, and it was causing a glitch in the assembly line. He said, this is why Americans no longer innovate that much, because they outsource their manufacturing, so they don't have a daily iterative process of how to manufacture better and how to design better.
You do this in art history sometimes, where you put two pictures by Rembrandt up and you compare and contrast.
Yeah.
Put Steve Jobs up on one screen and Elon Musk up on another.
Well, it's why you write separate biographies.
I know.
They each deserve a biography.
No, but what's
Jennifer Doudna is totally different.
No, but what are they, when you put these two up next to each other, what strikes you as different about them?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the similarity, which is reality distortion field. They both have this passion that if somebody says it can't be done,
right,
they stare blankly and say, you can do it.
Right.
And they force people. I think...
and they have a pretty good intuition of what's possible.
Both of them end up being right 90% of the time.
And they're telling engineers who you would think would know more than they do about what's
right,
possible.
and Jobs would say about, say, the Macintosh, you got to shave 20 seconds off the boot up time. And then Kenyon would say, you can't do it. You don't know coding that well. He'd say, you can do it. And after about a week, it would be done. Likewise, Musk does that 7 times a day, 10 times a day, just says, you got that paint station there, and it's taking 90 seconds. If it's not down to 45 seconds next week, your resignation is accepted, which is the polite way he says it.
Right.
Yeah, there's some, and he has a really great fingertip feel for the physics of material science and manufacturing, and he has what he calls first principles. Like when he first did the rocket, they were saying it costs this much. He said, no, I know exactly how much the materials cost, how much the fuel costs, and I know that you could do it for this. And the algorithm that he uses is question every requirement, delete every possible part, then you start automating, and it's worked. It's worked on Tesla, and it's worked on SpaceX. Starlink.
Continue with the contrast thing, with the differences between these two. Which is more lovable, Steve Jobs or Elon Musk? Who is more likely, if you go around and talk to the people who worked for them,
well, they both would have people walk through walls with them, except for those that, stormed off in a huff. If you survive either, you become loyal. Gwen Shotwell's been at SpaceX 20 years, Likewise, Eddie Q, Phil Schiller, a lot of them just totally loyal if they can make it through the grind. There's a spiritual quality to Steve Jobs that really makes him emotionally connect to people in an awesome way when he wants to.
Yeah.
Kathy, I'll tell this story about, well, I can't see her, so I'm going to go barrel ahead here. At one point, I was going to visit him, and Kathy was flying out with me. We were both going to California. And I texted him and said, okay.
This is Jobs or Musk?
This is Jobs. Okay. And I said, I'm coming by, and by the way, Kathy's with me, but I'll drop her, drop her. He said, no, bring her to dinner. I'd love to meet her, etc. And I said to Kathy, okay, be prepared, because if you say something like we drove down 101 because it was a beautiful day, he'll say it wasn't a beautiful day. He's rough. We get there. I've never seen anybody be so charming. And Kathy is like, oh, you're a lawyer. What do you think? Kathy said, you're totally wrong. That's the most charming, sweetest man I've ever met. I said, well, he knows how to do it. The difference is Musk would never do that.
He didn't know how to do it.
He didn't give it.
He didn't care. He just wouldn't do it. All right, we've got some questions from the audience. Can we do this?
Sure.
All right. Did you end up liking him more or less after writing the book? Why to either?
I always get did you like him question, and it's a really difficult one.
I know, you don't want to answer it.
Like is sort of a word that wouldn't be in the top 1,000 that pops to your mind because it's such a anodyne word in a way. The interesting thing about him, as I said earlier, there really are multiple Musks. If you're around the funny guy, the charming guy, it's a total blast. If you're around the guy who is aspirational and inspiring, and we have to get humanity, it's really interesting. If he's in engineering mode, You're totally mesmerized by him. When he gets into demon mode, it's a pain. It's like, especially people like me and you, I mean, we don't like it when people are not being nice.
Could you see him, did he ever do it to you?
He never turned demon mode on me, and everybody kept saying he's going to turn demon mode on you, but...
It's coming.
Fine, but I don't... the book's finished.
Yeah.
I think it was because I really did try to... I mean, you showed that picture. If people get the book, you can see it. It's with a group of people at Twitter the first day he's come in. And you can see I'm the detached observer. I'm about 6 steps away, just watching. And so I never had, it was called flamethrower, because he never hit the flamethrower on me.
Could you see it could you tell when he was about to do it to someone else?
Oh, yeah. I remember once being at dinner with Grimes and a few other people after some meetings. And he was worked up about a lot of things, but kind of in a fun, spirited mode. And she leaned over to me and said, demon mode. And it was like being in uptown New Orleans when you feel the air pressure lowering and you know a storm is about to come. And she sensed it before I did, about 20 seconds before I did. But you could see his eyes glazed. He became a bit trance-like and very dark. And boom, for about an hour, he was brutal.
Huh.
And as Grimes said, I like being around Elon, but I have to be careful which Elon I'm around.
So this leads to this question. Do you think Elon Musk is a good person?
Once again, good, nice, I think there are Elons that are good. Here's the actual complex answer to that. He is not good most of the time to people like right around him. He doesn't sit there saying, I really want to please all these people. I want to make sure they don't get unhappy. And when he went into Twitter and everybody's talking about psychological safety and we are nurturing, he's like, no, we're hardcore, we're all in.
Right.
No more psychological.
He's a wilderness.
Psychological safety is like, wilderness camp now.
Right.
Psychological safety is the enemy of intense progress.
Right.
So he is not, I can't remember the word was nice or good, but he has, like Einstein, I mean, I don't want to compare him too much, but he has a deep care about humanity, about getting us to the transition to a sustainable energy, about human civilization. And so he is motivated not by making money, not by being powerful and, kicking around people, but by these missions that came when he was a little kid sitting in the corner reading the superhero comics of I've got to help humanity be spacefaring. I've got to help it get over this sustainable energy issue. I've got to help it fight off artificial intelligence that might be evil. So there is a goodness to his missions, and they're epic missions, but in pursuing them, he sometimes runs roughshod over the 6 or 7 people happen to be at the table.
Right. What would Benjamin Franklin have thought of Elon Musk?
Benjamin Franklin was the opposite.
That was my question. Actually.
Okay, you pretended to read it. Benjamin Franklin was the opposite. Yeah. Benjamin Franklin cared too much often about bringing people together and having people like him. John Adams said of him, he was ingratiating and insinuating, which was meant to be an insult, because Franklin would always be there and know exactly how to flatter or how to get a person to like him. And when there was a conflict between Jefferson and Adams, Franklin would bring them together. So Franklin's superpower was a deep empathy and a desire to please and bring people together. Musk would say his superpower is not caring about that, but caring about the mission.
Given he's the world's wealthiest person, controls the social media company, and has the biggest satellite network, what risk is he to world stability?
I think that he has too much, and he would feel, is now a little bit too much power. The whole Starlink thing, he finally, at the end of the episode, he talks to General Mark Milley, he talks to Jake Sullivan.
Explain that just a little bit.
It was Starlink, when Russia invades Ukraine, every satellite is knocked out. Their military, our military, Viasat. The only satellites that work for communications are Starlink.
And why is that?
Because he made them hack-proof. And somehow our Defense Intelligence Agency didn't, and Boeing didn't.
That's riveting.
That's where you get to the higher level of, why does he have so much power? Well, why can't anybody else build satellites that can get into orbit?
Right.
So
that are hack-proof.
they're hack-proof, but also get 5,000 into orbit.
Right.
Do you know that U.S. intelligence military satellites, especially the ones that have to go into high Earth orbit, NASA can't launch them. Boeing can't launch them. SpaceX launches all of them.
It's shocking that this has ended up in the hands of the private.
Right. So this is why he has the power. And what happened that he sends all these Starlink satellites. It saves Ukraine because they weren't being able to communicate with the troops. He gets all this credit. But at a certain point, they're using Starlink without telling anybody to do a secret drone subs using Starlink that's going to hit the Russian fleet in Crimea. And I got caught. I'm sitting there at the Newman High School football game watching Arch Manning play, and the phone keeps. So I go behind the bleachers. He says, "This is going to start World War III. This is the end of the world." I made a mistake, actually, because he said, "And we're not allowing it. We're saying, no, we're not allowing them to use Starlink," which happens, and the subs, through the evening, I'm hearing this, the subs wash ashore helplessly.
The drones.
The drone subs. And I thought he meant he had disabled it, turned it off that day.
Right.
He had actually disabled it before.
Right.
But all that night, the Ukrainian ministers are saying, you got to turn it on. I have the text messages in the book. And finally he says, okay, maybe I do have, I don't offer him advice, but sometimes the questions So I said, have you talked to Jake Sullivan? Have you talked to Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs?
Are they aware of the...
Yes.
They're at least, the American military is
I'm going to say
aware.
something that I don't know personally, but he said today or yesterday in response to it, which is they knew what was happening, and if they had asked me to enable Starlink, I would have done it had they requested it.
Right.
Now, I don't know if that's true. I just read that today because he's been talking about it.
Right.
But I know he was talking to me. In fact, so afterwards, he finally decides, I'm going to take some Starlinks, the dishes and the services, and sell them outright to the U.S. military. And the U.S. military and intelligence agency will get to determine the terms of service.
They didn't come to him first. He went to them and said, you ought to have some of this.
No, they were Gwen Shotwell and him, they were all negotiating this. But I think it occurred to Musk, maybe, he says to me, it's in the book, why am I in this war? I invented this, we did Starlink so people could chill and watch Netflix movies and play video games. Why am I in this? So I don't know exactly. It took about a week or two to negotiate.
At what point does he become aware that he has the one unhackable sat communication?
Oh, about 40 minutes into the Russian invasion, first night.
But before that, he didn't. So that's what alerts him. That before that, he didn't realize.
I don't know. I think he probably would have been surprised that no other, that Viasat and all these others. It was just a simple denial of service attack.
Right.
That it wasn't like they hacked, but, his are still working.
Huh.
And he's got 5,000 of them. Because he shoots them off twice a week, 40 or 50, and he reuses the boosters. Whereas, as I said, NASA can't, with its own rockets, get into high Earth orbit.
Right. You have a great subject. So, how does the United States regain its independence from Elon Musk?
Well, first of all, I could learn how to manufacture shit.
Yeah. How could we stop him from interfering in foreign policy? So, but how, this is the first part of the question.
I think that
foreign policy sort of intervened with him, that it sort of found him rather than, he wasn't really looking.
I would think it would be useful. This is a larger question, which is why is he successful at some of these things, like getting 5,000 satellites up? And he said, we used to be a nation of really great risk takers. Even the people who ran Boeing probably were risk takers at one point. Not safety risks, but like they were going to try rockets and stuff. He said everybody who came here whether it was on the Mayflower or across the Rio Grande. They were adventurous, they took risks. He says, nowadays, we have more referees than we have risk takers. We have more regulators than we have innovators. We have more people saying you can't do it, the lawyers, the whatever. And he said it's made it so that our big military contractors can't get anything done. We can't get high-speed rail. I would think that the best way to make sure he doesn't have so much clout on things is for somebody to be able to build more electric vehicles. I mean, he built a charging network, and then the U.S. government, Ford, GM, decided to build their own, and they've surrendered because the Tesla charging network works. I'm not trying to, just sing his praises, but it would be useful if you don't want him to control the charging network in America, if you don't want him to control the internet in outer space, if you don't want him to control rocket launches, to have Boeing and Northrop Grumman and others be able to get stuff done.
We only got a minute or two left. I'm curious. This is.
But wait, let me make it clear. I do think that should happen. That there should be competitors. I don't think it's really
not healthy.
great to have
right.
anybody, especially a guy who I will euphemistically say is mercurial, having this much power.
Yeah. This is your first book. Well, maybe not your first book, because Jennifer Doudna has got a career ahead of her. But you've got a character you've got this character who's going to be moving through space, doing lots of things after your book is done. You didn't have a natural ending to the book. How did you deal with that?
Well, first, I've finally sort of said, have I explained and given enough stories so that you get Elon Musk? And he's now started the AI company. He's now launched Starship. He's now turned Twitter into X. You know what he's like and what he's going to do. If 3 years from now he does another global car, if he buys something, I think you will fully understand him. It's not like you need more chapters and for me to keep the book open.
Where do you think he goes from here?
I was stunned after he was running 6 companies, and I thought, man, he kept saying, maybe I'm biting off more than I can chew because I've got Twitter, I'm turning it into X, I'm doing. And then when he asked me to summon me, so to speak, say, you got to come to Austin, I've got something to tell you, I don't want to tell you on the phone. It was about starting the new AI company. I'm like, wait, you're now starting a 7th company? And I said, what? He said, yeah, I'm always pushing my chips back on the table. I always want to push the edge of the envelope.
Walter Isaacson, thank you very much.
Michael Lewis. Was that good? Yeah, sure.